Good afternoon, all. By now, I'm sure most of us have started a tradition of some sort of reading over the story of the Exodus, or reading the story of the sacrifice of Yeshua, something during these holy days. It will fill them up in a way that you can't know until you do this in some way or some fashion. It shows us in some detail how Yahweh's chosen people were enslaved by the Egyptians. It shows us in some detail how the Israelites were beaten, whipped, and forced to work. That's something that we call slavery these days, and some is around the planet, but not as much as it was. But in these days, you could grab someone and make them work for you because it was the way things were. Some of the incredible feats that, when you look back over history and consider some of the things that were built during these times, the pyramids, the Sphinx, the palaces, some of these things are today still things that in modern times, they still don't know how they were built with manual labor. They still guess at it. But the focus of the story is in Yahweh Elohim sending Moses and Aaron to Pharaoh to tell him to free Yahweh's people in order that they might go into the desert to serve him. Of course, being a man of some ego, Pharaoh refused. We'll start with Exodus, the 7th chapter, the 1st verse. And Yahweh said to Moses, "See, I have made you as a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron, your brother, will be your prophet. You will speak all that I will command you, and Aaron, your brother, will speak to Pharaoh, and he will release the Israelites from his land. And I myself will harden the heart of Pharaoh, and I will make my signs and my wonders numerous in the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh will not listen to you. And I will put my hand into Egypt and bring out my division, my people, the Israelites, from the land of Egypt with great punishments. And the Egyptians will know that I am Yahweh when I stretch out my hand over Egypt and bring the Israelites out from their land in the midst." And Moses and Aaron did it. And this was not flailed about as some do, but when they did this, as Yahweh commanded them, so they did. At the time, Moses was 80 years old, and Aaron was 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. Continuing in Exodus, the 7th chapter, the 16th verse. And you must say to him, Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, has sent me to you, saying, release my people, that they may serve me in the desert. And look, you have not listened until now. Thus says Yahweh, by this time you will know that I am Yahweh. Look, I am about to strike with the staff that is in my hand the water that is in the Nile, and it will be changed to blood. And the fish that are in the Nile will die, and the Nile will stink, and the Egyptians will be unable to drink water from the Nile. And Yahweh said to Moses, say to Aaron, take your staff and stretch your hand out over the waters of Egypt and over the rivers, over their canals and over their pools and over all their reservoirs of water, so that they become blood. And blood will be in all the land of Egypt in vessels of wood and stone. And Moses and Aaron did so, as Yahweh had commanded. And he raised the staff and struck the water that was in the Nile before the eyes of Pharaoh and before his eyes of his servants. And all of the water that was in the Nile was changed to blood. And the fish that were in the Nile died, and the Nile stank. And the Egyptians were not able to drink the water from the Nile, and the blood was in the land of Egypt. And the magicians of Egypt did likewise with their magic arts, their secret arts. And Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he did not listen to them as Yahweh had spoken. And Pharaoh turned and went to his house, and he did not take all this to heart. Yet, because Pharaoh's magicians were able to do the same thing, Pharaoh ignored Moses. This was something that I have often thought about, but nobody else apparently thought about it. If I were the magicians of Pharaoh, I would have turned the water back to pure water. If nobody else would have anything to drink, I would have had something to drink. But that's just me. Continuing in Exodus, the 8th chapter, the 1st verse. And Yahweh said to Moses, go to Pharaoh and say to him, thus says Yahweh, release my people so that they may serve me. And if you are refusing to release, look, I am going to plague all your territory with frogs. What? And the Nile will swarm with frogs, and they will go up and come into your house, and into your bedroom, and onto your bed, and into the house of your servants, and among your people, and into your ovens, and into your kneading troughs. Now they're in your food. Verse 4. And the frogs will go up against you, and against your people, and against all of your servants. And Yahweh said to Moses, say to Aaron, stretch out your hand with your staff over the rivers, and over the canals, and over the pools, and bring up the frogs on the land of Egypt. And Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs went up and covered the land of Egypt. And the magicians did likewise with their secret arts. These are stupid magicians. You could turn this stuff back on them and turn things back as they were. They didn't care much for Pharaoh themselves. Verse 7, and the magicians did likewise with their secret arts. And they brought up frogs. What? Over the land of Egypt. Pharaoh had some heartless magicians too. Yahweh didn't say anything about hardening the magicians' hearts. They didn't even clean the stink up for themselves. Continuing in Exodus, the 9th chapter, the 1st verse. And Yahweh said to Moses, go to Pharaoh and say to him, thus says Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, release my people so that they may serve me. And if you are refusing to release, and you still are keeping hold of them, look, the hand of Yahweh is about to be present with a very severe plague on your livestock that are in the house, that are in the field, on the donkeys, on the horses, on the camels, on the cattle, and on the sheep and the goats. But Yahweh will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and the livestock of Egypt. And not a thing will die from all that belongs to the Israelites. That'll make a difference, I think. Verse 5. And Yahweh set an appointed time, saying, tomorrow Yahweh will do this thing in the land. And Yahweh did this thing in the next day. All the livestock of Egypt died, but from the livestock of the Israelites, not one died. And Pharaoh sent to check, and it turned out not even one from the livestock of Israel had died. But Pharaoh's heart was insensitive, and he did not release the people. And Yahweh said to Moses and to Aaron, take for yourselves full handfuls of soot from a smelting furnace, and let Moses sprinkle it toward the heavens before the eyes of Pharaoh, and it will become fine dust over all the land of Egypt. And it will become on humans and on animals a skin sore, sprouting blisters all over the land of Egypt. And they took the soot of the smelting furnace, and they stood before Pharaoh, and Moses sprinkled it toward the heavens. And it became skin sores, sprouting blisters on humans and on animals. And the magicians were not able to stand before Moses because of the skin sores. For the skin sores were on the magicians and all the Egyptians. And Yahweh hardened Pharaoh's heart. I often wonder about this. is not so much Yahweh doing this. His heart was already hard. And a lot of people still say, he hardened his heart. No, this man didn't care about anybody but himself. And that was shown to us early in this sequence. And man always blames God first. Always. This man's heart was hard. He cared about no one but himself. Verse 12. And Yahweh, skip that. And he did not listen to them, as Yahweh had spoken to Moses. And Yahweh said to Moses, start early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh. Look, he is going out to the water, and you must say to him, thus says Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, release my people so that they may serve me. Yet only when Yahweh came down and killed off all of the firstborn children of the Egyptians and the firstborn of their animals and the firstborn of Pharaoh, did Pharaoh release the Israelites to leave Egypt and go down to serve him. By then, a mixed multitude of Egyptians left with them. These were the events that led to the first Passover. Continuing in Exodus, the 12th chapter, the first verse. And Yahweh Elohim spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be to you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th of this month, they shall take to them each man a lamb for a father's house. A lamb for a house. And if the household is too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take according to the number of the souls, each one, according to the each eating of his mouth. You shall count concerning the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year, fresh one. You shall take from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the month. I said the other night, as they had already been doing it on the 15th. The Hebrews did. The Pharisees specifically. And they were already disobeying. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And they shall take some of the blood and strike it on the two side posts and upon the upper doorpost of the houses in which they shall eat it. And they shall eat the flesh in the night, roasted with fire and unleavened bread. They shall eat it with bitter herbs. Do not eat of it raw, nor boiled at all with water. but roasted with fire, its head with its legs, and with its inward parts. And you shall not let any of it remain until the morning. And that which remains of it until the morning, you shall burn with fire. And you shall eat of it this way, with your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. And you shall eat it in a hurry. This is the only time the Bible says anything about hurrying up about anything. You that want to hurry up everything. It's the only time that you have to do that. Because you were going to be running up out of Egypt as soon as you finished eating. This is Yahweh's Passover. Verse 12. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And I will execute judgments against all the gods of Egypt. I am Yahweh Elohim. Verse 13. And the blood shall be a sign to you upon the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. And the plague shall be upon you for destruction when I smite in the land of Egypt. And this day shall be a memorial to you. And you shall keep it as a feast to Yahweh Elohim throughout your generations. You shall keep it as a feast by a law forever. Those who don't think you have to do it anymore. You keep it as a feast by a law forever. Verse 15. You shall eat unleavened bread 7 days. Even the first day you shall put away leaven out of your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the seventh day, that soul shall be cut off from from Israel. And on the first day shall be a holy gathering. And in the seventh day there shall be a holy gathering for you. No manner of work shall be done in them, except that which every man must do to eat. That only may be done by you. And you shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. For in that same day I have brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall keep this day in your generations by a law forever. Mark that in case anybody ever asks you why you still do this. Verse 18. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. 7 days there shall be no leavened bread found in your houses. For whoever eats that which is leavened, even that soul shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel. among the aliens and among the natives of the land. You shall eat nothing leavened. In all your places, in all your dwelling places, you shall eat unleavened bread. And as we all know, Yahweh Elohim came, and all who were behind doorposts or lintels, not painted with the blood of the paschal lambs, their firstborn sons of men and beasts were killed. Many Egyptians' sons died that night, including the son of Pharaoh Ramses II. It is at this point that Pharaoh hesitantly decided to free the Israelites and to let them go and serve the eternal Yahweh. Now that they were free and allowed to serve Yahweh in his presence, they were happy and obedient, and Yahweh had no more trouble with them, right? No. Our title today, Bring Us Barrabas. Now, let's be honest. We know that even after being freed from hard bondage by Yahweh Elohim and being set free with much spoil from the Egyptians, and let's be honest about this spoiling of the Egyptians as well. This was no gift. The Israelites built Egypt for 400 years. They were made to work every day for 400 years. This gift, if you could call it that, this was simply back pay, if anything, not a gift. And in seeing that the Israelites were somehow protected from the plagues, many Egyptians came out with them to get away from Pharaoh. Yet there is an old psychological saying that persists in such events. You've heard it said that when people are on their second or third marriage and go to a psychologist in some attempt to find out why things are going so badly for them, the psychologist will tell them in a matter-of-fact tone, wherever you go, there you are. In essence, whatever part of the problem is caused by you, you take it with you wherever you go. And the problem begins anew in your new situation if you don't work on it. Only when you fix you does the problem go away. That was the situation with the Israelites. As soon as they got out from under Pharaoh's whip and were free, these stiff-necked folks started complaining about everything. Not enough water, not enough meat, too much meat, wrong kind of meat. They whined about everything. And Yahweh supplied them every need at every turn. Yet, as soon as an alternative leader rose up and began inciting an insurrection against Moses, the Israelites jumped right up and followed Korah, Dathan, and Abiram and tried to dump Moses and Aaron. Continuing in Numbers, the 16th chapter, the first verse. Now Korah, the son of Ishar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, took both Dathan and Abiram, the son of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, and even they rose up before Moses with some of the sons of Israel, 250 rulers of the assembly, elect men in the congregation, men who were well known, no hiding for them. And they gathered themselves against Moses and against Aaron and said to them, "You take too much upon yourself, since all the congregation are holy." Technically, they were right, but this was a nation of priests at this time. That was what the intention was. They were right, but their spirit wasn't right. You take too much upon you, since all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the eternal is among them. Why do they lift yourselves up? Why do you lift yourselves up above the congregation of Yahweh Elohim? One thing, they were put there by Yahweh Elohim. They didn't do it. As I said, wherever you are, you follow. Verse 4. And Moses heard and fell on his face, and he spoke to Korah and to all his company, saying, "Even tomorrow the Eternal will show you who are his, and him who is holy, and will cause them to come near to him. Even him who has chosen, he will cause to come near him. Do this. Take fire pans, Korah and all his company, and put fire in them, and put incense in them before Yahweh Elohim tomorrow. And it shall be the man who Yahweh Elohim chooses, he shall be holy. You take too much upon yourselves, sons of Levi." And Moses said to Korah, "Hear now, you sons of Levi. Is it only a small thing that you have, that Yahweh Elohim of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring himself near you to do this service of the tabernacle of Yahweh Elohim, and to stand before the congregation to minister to them? And he has brought you near, and all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you. And do you seek the priesthood also? For this cause, you and all your company are gathered against Yahweh the Eternal. And what is Aaron, that you murmur against him? And Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab. And they said, we will not come up. Is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of the land that flows with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness? But must you also seize dominion over us? Besides, you have not brought us into a land that flows with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance in fields and vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of these men? Who said anything about that? They making up stuff now. We will not come up. That's the bottom line. You didn't want to. Verse 15. And Moses was very angry and said to the Eternal, do not respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, neither have I hurt one of them. And Moses said to Korah, stand before the Eternal, you and all your company, you and they, and Aaron, tomorrow. And every man take his fire pan and put incense in them. Mark yourselves. And let every man bring his fire pan before the Eternal. 250 fire pans. You also, and Aaron, each with his fire pan. Everybody mark yourselves. Verse 18. And every man took his fire pan and put fire in them and laid incense on it. And stood in the door of the tabernacle of the congregation with Moses and Aaron. And Korah gathered all the congregation against them to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And the glory of the Eternal appeared to all the congregation. And the Eternal spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, separate yourselves from among this congregation, so that I may devour them in a moment. Verse 22. And they fell upon their faces and said, O Yahweh, the Elohim of all the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and you will be angry with all the congregation? 23. And Yahweh Elohim spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the congregation, saying, get away from these tents of Korah and Dathan and Abiram. And Moses rose up and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spoke to the congregation, saying, I pray you, get away from these tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest you be destroyed in all their sin. So they got away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram on every side. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood in the door of their tents. Bold men stood in the door of their tents, and their wives and their sons and infants with them. And Moses said, by this you shall know that the Eternal has sent me to do all these works, and that not from his own heart these things were done. 29. If these men die the common death of all men, or if they are visited according to the examination of all men, the Eternal has not sent me. But if the Eternal makes a new thing, and the earth opens up her mouth and swallows them all, with all that they have, and they go down alive into the pit, then you shall understand that these men have provoked Yahweh Elohim. And it happened as he had made an end of speaking all these words. The ground under them split apart, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up, and their households, and all the men who were for Korah, and all their goods. They and all that they had went down alive into Sheol, or a grave. And the earth closed upon them, and they perished from among the congregation. And all Israel around them fled at their cry. For they said, lest the earth swallow us all up. And there came out a fire from the Eternal and burned up the 250 men who offered incense. It just seemed that no matter what Yahweh did for the Israelites, it was never enough. They had to have their way, and eventually, of the original chosen ones who came out of Egypt, only Joshua and Caleb were allowed to go into the promised land. As somebody said a long time ago about another situation, it will catch up to you. Numbers, 32nd chapter, the 11th verse. Almost done. Surely none of the men that came up out of Egypt from 20 years old up, and up shall see the land which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, because they have not fully followed me. Except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, and Joshua, the son of Nun. For they have fully followed Yahweh Elohim. And throughout the history of these people, they have always been selfish, warlike, grumbling, and stiff-necked. And wherever they've gone, there they were. And Yahweh knew it. He warned every prophet he sent to them of their attitude before they got there and saw it for themselves. He sent them in to guide them so that the prophets would be warned of their attitude before they got there. Ezekiel, the second chapter, the first verse. And he said to me, Son of man, stand on your feet, and I will speak to you. And the Spirit entered into me when he spoke to me. And set me on my feet, so that I heard him who spoke to me. And he said to me, Son of man, I am sending you to the sons of Israel, to the nations, the rebelling ones who have rebelled against me after all I did for them. They and their fathers have sinned against me to this day, and the sons are stiff of face and hard of heart. I am sending you to them, and you shall say to them, so says Yahweh Elohim. And they, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear, for they are a rebellious house. Yea, they shall know that there has been a prophet among them, and the Son of Man. Do not be afraid of them and of their words, though briars and thorns are with you. Coming from them, of course. And you dwell among scorpions. Do not be afraid of their words, nor frightened by their faces. Though they are a rebellious house, and you shall speak my words to them, whether they are to hear or whether they will forbear, for they are rebellious. And this attitude carried over into the days of Yeshua the Messiah. When he came unto them, they found a way into another problem. In 30 AD, Jerusalem was under Roman occupation. And as always, the Pharisees, who became as Korah and Dathan during the Exodus, had found their way to power and had corrupted themselves by the money and prestige of the Roman Empire and the Caesars. Yet they sat in Moses' seat. They were keepers of the word, or the oracles of Yahweh Elohim. Matthew, the 23rd chapter, the first verse. Then Yahshua spoke to the crowd and to his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Therefore, whatever they tell you to do, observe and do. But do not do according to their works, for they say and do not do. But as is usually true, there are always people who have ears to hear and understand when a prophet or a holy one is among them. Continuing in Mark, the 11th chapter, the first verse. And when they drew near to Jerusalem, to Bethphage and Bethany and the Mount of Olives, he sent out 2 of his disciples, and he said to them, "Go into the village over across from you, and as soon as you have entered into it, you will find a colt tied on which no man has ever sat." This in itself is an interesting thing. You have ever seen a horse that has never had a man sit on it before, and all of a sudden that man sits on it? You don't want to be the guy on that horse. Untie it and bring it to me. And if anyone says to you, "Why do you do this?" say that Yeshua Messiah has need of him, and immediately he will send him here. And they went and they found the colt tied by the door outside, in a place where 2 ways met. And they untied him. And certain of these men who stood there and said to them, "What are you doing untying that colt?" And they said to them, as Yeshua had commanded. And they said to them, "Go." And they brought the colt to Yeshua without incident. Without incident. And they threw their garments on it, and he sat on it. This, as I said, was a miracle in itself. He rode a colt into Jerusalem without incident that had not been broken in yet. Without incident. And many spread their garments in the way, and others cut branches down off trees and scattered them in the way. And those going before and those following cried out, saying, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of Elohim. Blessed is the kingdom of our father David, who comes in the name of Elohim. Hosanna in the highest." Hosanna in the highest is translated, "Oh, save from on high," or salvation from on high. The common people knew from which they had heard these things and seen previously Yeshua's healing hands all through the districts. They had seen the blind given their sight. They had seen the sick healed, the lame made to walk. They had heard the teachings of Yeshua in the synagogues, and they had made their choice silently. They were now choosing the Lamb of Yahweh for their eternal sacrifice. Some knew, but most had never read this verse before. But the Pharisees and Sadducees had. They had to memorize the Torah before being placed into their positions, except the ones placed there by bribery. I say that because it happened. Isaiah, the 62nd chapter, the 10th verse. Go through the gates. Prepare ye the way of the people. Cast up the highway. Gather out the stones. Lift up a standard for the people. Behold, Yeshua hath proclaimed until the end of the world. Say you to the daughter of Zion, behold, thy salvation cometh. Behold, his reward is with him, and his word before him. And they shall call them the holy people, the redeemed of Yeshua. And you shall be called, sought out, a city not forsaken. But the Pharisees were not going to give up their power even to the Son of Yahweh without a fight. They'd heard of the miracles and tried to gainsay them all. And finally, when they found a traitor among Yeshua's disciples, namely Judas, they felt that this was their last chance to finally be rid of him. Not realizing, just as their leader Satan didn't realize, that he was playing right into the hands of the Almighty. Judas sold Yeshua out right at the Mount of Olives. Continuing in Luke, the 22nd chapter, the 47th verse. And as he was yet speaking, behold, a crowd. And he who was called Judas, one of the 12, went before him, and he drew near Yeshua to kiss him. But Yeshua said to him, Judas, do you betray the Son of Man with a kiss? (49) And those around him, seeing what was about to occur, they said to him, Master, shall we strike with the sword? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. And Yeshua answered and said, Let it go until now. Touching his ear, he healed him. And Yeshua said to the priests and commanders of the temple and the elders who had come to him, Have you come out as against a robber with swords and staves. When I was with you in the temple daily, you did not stretch out your hands to me. Nothing like it. And he was crucified at that point. And that's basically why we're here today. There is more here, but we can read it ourselves. Any questions? Thurman.
Pastor, thinking about the accounts of the Israelites, in the wilderness, there's a verse in the New Testament that said the Apostle Paul wrote that those things are written as an example for us to not, do the kind of things that they did, the murmuring and complaining and things like that, so those it's in there for a good purpose, so that we don't repeat what they were doing.
Yep.
And make Yahweh mad at us.
Anything else?
They were there.
We're gonna be there too.
Yeah.
And some of us are gonna be the same as they are were. Don't know off the top of my head, but there were enough to populate Roman times to the point where they basically got what they wanted from the Romans at all times. And when the time came, they even put themselves in a place where they eliminated the master. Yep. Yes.
I think it was, we were reading in 2 Corinthians, chapter 9. I think, if I didn't miss it.
Is that for the offering on scripture?
Oh, no, that was not it. In regarding to how Pharaoh had hardened, and he had his magicians, and when the river Nile stunk, fish had died in the flood. You would think that Pharaoh would have snapped out of it, realizing that these are my magicians. They couldn't even clean this mess up. They were afraid. But it didn't happen because he was so hardened.
Vanity.
He was so stubborn. He
All
was
is
like,
vanity.
no, this is not happening.
At that point, he knew if he gave up anything, he would give up everything. And he wasn't willing to do that.
He would have been considered a failure.
Ego was too big.
Yes.
Sherry.
Piggybacking off what Sister Ruby was talking about, Pharaoh's heart being hardened, but his decision affected everyone.
Oh, yes.
With everyone catching boils and diseases and pestilence and frogs. Pharaoh's hardening up his heart affected his own tribe. And they suffered because of him.
They couldn't even present themselves before.
Well, that just shows
Because they were
how
so full of boil.
You said
and that just shows about his vanity.
his
then.
vanity,
That he wouldn't hold that.
even his people that
Yeah.
worshiped
Yeah,
him,
exactly.
everyone suffered because of his
And he
decision.
didn't care.
He didn't care. The animals, the people, the children.
You would think how frightened the people that watched it must have been, and they still said, nope, we're following Pharaoh. Nope, he's our leader. Nope, forget that. And it's horrible, it's painful to hear that I praise the Father that we're here and we are learning of this and taking to heart what the Father had shown Moses and Aaron was teaching us to do, while others refuse to say, I'm not.
Melina?
I was just gonna say that, it said that, God hardened Pharaoh's heart. He did not.
Yeah,
His
that's what
heart
it
was
was
hard.
He's hardened, right?
It was already hardened, right.
Stubborn.
Because he was just evil.
Right,
His heart
exactly.
was
He had
hard.
so much pride.
And
Nothing
he
allowed
was
it.
evil.
Right.
Yes.
Right, that's what they were saying. He didn't harden
Right.
his heart. His heart was already
Yep.
infected.
Yep.
And the fact that the Father had sent all these plagues to tell him, to warn him, listen, heed to my word. And he chose not to.
Thurman?
I think it's in James, it says, the Elohim cannot be tempted by evil, neither does he tempt
Right.
man with evil. So he wouldn't harden Pharaoh. It was already.
It was already hard.
Pharaoh was subject to them, demons and stuff, with that false religion and stuff that they practiced.
Yep. Sherry?
But what's so humbling is that Aaron and Moses, at the age that they were,
Yes,
the
yes.
Father chose them at those delicate ages, that they too learned. They were learning at those ages. They were older, but he chose them. So it doesn't make a difference how old we are.
Right.
Because he says we're still able to learn.
Right.
And he chose them. And they were older. I'm sure they were, in that time, I'm sure they were fit and good health.
Yes,
They were
yes.
fit and strong and good health. But he chose them at those numbers. 80s.
80 and 83.
Yes, and they learned from that.
Yes.
It's just, that's so humbling to be in that position, to still learn at those numbers.
Ruby?
Thinking back on Sister Sherry, yes, sisters, it is so true. The age was a delicate age, and yet the Father sees if you have a willing heart. I think that when I got baptized when I was 15, I did it because I was told I was supposed to. But not until I was 53 I did this.
Right.
And
That you understood it.
that I started understanding. But the Father had to see in me if I had a willing heart to accept and to learn and to suction in all that. At one point I thought, okay, but it wasn't like that. I had to learn the many things that happened to me, of sicknesses and failures. But the Father said, stubborn child, I will teach you, but you have to be willing. And I think that's where it gets to us, if we have a willing heart. Like Sister Sherry said, it was a delicate age. They could have said, I'm tired, I can't do this, let the youngs do this. But no, it wasn't like that. They had willing hearts and they had fervency. They wanted to learn and to preach and to share and to show the mighty hand of the Father. I think it's just amazing and awesome.
Any more?
I have one more thing. The more we read year after year, as we go through the commencement, and we read these scriptures year after year, and even on our own, they get more deeper. Yes. If you didn't quite understand them back then, but now that you read it, it's like the Father opens up your understanding. There's clarity, right? Knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And you can visually, I'm visual, you can see all of this. And you're so humble and so grateful to understand the depth of this, the depth of this word. Because this word is, as Pastor always says, this word is alive, and it's breathing. And you just want to eat it all up. You want to just keep eating and eating and eating. But I'm so humble to be able to just eat a portion. Yes. And apply it to our lives each and every day.
Well, the scriptures say, here a little, there a little.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. It's just so beautiful and so humble. That's it.
Praise Him.
That's all I've got.
Thanks for speaking while